Welcome back. So what we're going to do now is maybe look at adding in a little design around about here in the shape of a hole. And it's purely just for aesthetic reasons, but what we can do is be a bit creative. Now, we don't need things to start off life as an internal polygon line. We can just create a panel and convert it to an internal shape later. This just gives us the freedom to create something externally without having to work inside here. So let's just do something quick. Let's just create a circle like so. Just snap that to there. And then we've got all these points to play around with now. So let's make kind of a skull. And again, this is just going to be really rough. I'll tidy it up before the next video. That maybe pull these points up here. Let's just edit these curve points. You can see how useful it is having that snap to grid on, because we can work on both sides, and because we're snapping to points, we know that they're both going to be in the same point. Let's move that over there. Actually, let's undo that. Okay. You know what? I'm going to leave that. Instead, I'm just going to select this point here and move it down. Something like that. Move these points up. I'm not sure why that's, but you get the general idea. So let's say that's a rough upper skull shape with some fang-like teeth pointing down. But what we want is that to be a hole out of the skirt there. All we need to do is right click, copy as internal shape, paste, put that up there, and as you can see, it's now an internal shape. And you can just make it out there. Or we could go a step further and select that and then go convert to hole. Then if we simulate this, we can make that more obvious by applying different fabrics. Now, we haven't investigated fabrics just yet, and I have been playing around with them actually while I've been working. But let's just add in another fabric now. So I'm just going to click Add in here in the object browser. That'll just give you a generic fabric one. Now if we select this skirt, scroll down in the property editor, you'll see a fabric tab. Now at the moment it's set to satin, and they're just a couple of materials that I've added in as I've been working. We'll set that to fabric 1. Now if we select fabric 1, it highlights this as red, and that's to show that that's got that fabric applied to it. But we can go in and we can change the colour, so we could have that red. We could even add some specularity to it, like so. But that's showing up that hole a lot better. But we could also go a step further and maybe say, well, we want a hole, but we want it full of this particular pattern. So maybe this area is solid and this area is transparent. If we sync that, that will snap up like that. Unfold itself. Just give it a hand. Or something like that. So let's just re-evaluate this. Just to make it a little bit easier, I'm just going to pull this up, pull this out, just double check that that sewing is not flipped or anything. Now let's simulate this again. So you notice that snapped into that hole to create that shape. There we go, it's starting to unfold. As you can see, as we're adding more and more into this, it's taking a little bit longer to evaluate. But that's the general idea. And it looks like that fabric has, I'm not sure what's happened with that. Oh, actually, yep, let's make sure that's on a layer 1 as well. Double check that's layer 1. Resynchronize that. That's better. Because this internal shape wasn't set as the same layer as this, it was fighting with the dress underneath. So that's why it's important to have your layers set up when you've got overlapping cloth. And this sort of technique of having one panel, an external panel attaching to an internal shape, is pretty much how you create pockets or other elements like that. But rather than attaching it and making that a hole, it's still a solid shape, but the pocket attaches to that, and maybe the pocket fabric's a little bit bigger, just so you get that sagginess. But that's basically adding in that sort of shape there. Like I say, I'm probably going to refine this shape a little bit before the next lesson. But one thing that I've forgotten to talk about is these actual fabrics that I've been adding on here. Let's just stop the simulation. So basically, when you're creating things in Marvelous Designer, they will have this basic fabric attached. And as you can see, by default, this has the basic fabric attached, because when I select it, like so, it shows up red here. Also, we have this leather and also this satin material. Now these are ones that I've added in just to help to keep the shape of these garments, and also dictate how the creases and folds react with each other, and just how the fabric looks. I mean, obviously for a leather material it's going to be a lot more rigid, so as you can see here, I created that and added it to the sleeves and the upper part of the bodice just to make them a bit stiffer. Everything else is applied, has this satin material applied to it, and that is just to make it a lot looser and a lot more fluid. Now it's very easy to create a new material, just as we did earlier. Create add, click add, and you get your new fabric down here. You can even give it a name, so let's say leather new, because we'll just create a new leather material. Let's just scroll this up. Now basically you can apply a texture, adjust your colour, your specular colour, and even give it an emissive colour, or even give it a transparency by adjusting the opacity. What we're interested in now down here is this preset option down here. Click on that and you will get all these different settings. Just going to pull this off. I don't want it to snap. Okay, don't look like I can, but basically there's a lot more scrolling off the bottom, but you can see here we have leather, knit, denim, cotton, and that dictates the actual properties of the fabric that you're simulating. So like I say, for the sleeves and the bodice, I selected leather because I wanted the fabric to be a lot tougher and a lot more rigid, whereas for the rest of the garment I set it to satin just so that it fell a lot loosely. And that's it basically. You just say leather, give it a colour, and then if, let's say, we want the skirt to be leather, we select those panels there, go down to our leather new, and then that's applied. And then next time you simulate, that will change depending on what the properties are of that particular preset. Now you can, if I just scroll this down, you can, if you open the detail tab, you can edit that and create your very own preset if you've got a certain type of cloth that you want to mimic. But to be honest, 99.9% of the time, these presets in here are just as good. And we'll probably investigate those a little bit more towards the end when we're coming to doing our sort of final levels of simulation before we export the mesh. I just thought I would touch on them now in case you're working in this scene and you've noticed these extra fabrics floating around and just wondered how they're there, why they're there, and how you set them up. So yeah, I've just applied them basically just to these areas, just to change the way they simulate. But yeah, I think that's it for this video. We've added the second layer of the skirt, also added in this hole and attached it to an internal shape, which again, the same process can be applied to pockets or things like that. And towards the end, we've also just touched upon adjusting the fabric properties of the cloth. But like I say, we'll talk about that a little bit more later on in the tutorial. So the dress is coming along nicely now. So I think what we'll do maybe in the next lesson is we'll look at adding just some final details to the dress, and then we'll move on from there to look at the fabric properties, exporting and all that sort of thing.